Allan Cameron is a member of Saltbush Six and was an original band member for a certain artist known as Keith Urban. He recently released the single Father's Eyes. It's a really powerful, beautiful single, and we're going to talk about that and other things. Hi, Allan.
Hi, Sophie. Hey, everybody, and thank you.
Great to meet you and to talk about this song. And you released Father's Eyes in time for Father's Day this year. When did you actually write it?
I actually wrote it in the 90s. It was that sort of, it's hard to remember, the transition. But yeah, I did write it a fair while ago. But and I did release it on a CD, an album before streaming. So now that I've been starting to release some more material and have a streaming personality, because to be able to stream, you had to put a song up, which I put Big Noise, Bright Lights out early in the year, which I wrote with the late Marlon Holden used to be in Saltbush, used to be over there. And I actually played this version of the song to a few people like Michael McCartan and a very well-known musician and drummer up here. And I said, what can I do to this to make it for now, ready to put out? And he actually said nothing. So, which is very kind of him. That was a long way around to say that I just wanted to put it out again. And it wasn't actually that the Father's Day thing was a coincidence in the end.
Right.
Obviously, when we realised went with it, but yeah, it was an important song to me, and I think it's grown more important to me as I've examined my life.
Mm-hmm. How did it feel for you when you went back and listened to it, having recorded it that long ago? I mean, it sounds contemporary. I would never have guessed you actually.
So the recording's not quite that old. The recording's actually, it's probably 10 years ago. Okay. So yeah, look, that's the main reason I thought I'd want to do a new recording. Obviously, part of the process for us is the fun of recording. The joy of it. It can be hard work, but that process is what we sort of live for, going into the studio. But yeah, I was worried because obviously people's tastes change, but there's certain things that come back around. So people are starting to like a little bit more ambient and meaningful, not so full-on production again. So that was probably why it stood up.
Yeah. And I'd also suggest that whenever you're singing or writing from the heart, that never goes out of style. And that's what this song is.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's exactly it. And it was from a period when for me anyway, personally, I was writing some of my best songs, that I was starting to write my best songs. Now, hopefully I'm still able to write good songs. But I found that happy medium between talking about my own personal life and being able to deliver that to people, that hopefully it talks to them as well. That's really tough.
Yeah, it is. But it's also the case, I think, that the specific can be really universal. And in this song, you are talking about your own father who died when you were 7. And I'm wondering, when you wrote this song, if you felt as if you were that 7-year-old child, or if you wrote it from the perspective of an adult looking back on what had happened.
Yeah, looking back for sure. So one of the big problems I have was I actually don't have many memories of my dad. So, I know some people remember when they were children really clearly. And for me, whether it was the trauma of him dying so young in a car crash, and I don't know. Obviously, this is one of the things I've been examining as I've grown older, that I really do just have little flashes of memories, and I could never understand why that was. Again, because a lot of people I talk to, I remember when Mum picked me up when I was 3. Really? Nope. So yeah, but that and also the fact that as I became a teenager and then into my 20s, and I found music at age 16. I got my first guitar, and that just locked in what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I think that was the real catalyst that made me start examining everything, because up until then I tried to be my dad, even though I wasn't even sure what that was. I knew he was an Aussie male who was a shearer and drove trucks, and the quintessential Aussie male. And I suppose I tried to be that for a while and realised that wasn't who I was. I'm from Tamworth. I'm from the land. My mother's family had a farm at Nemmingar just outside of Tamworth until, maybe 15 years ago. So we always lived in the country. And I just realised that I wasn't going to be a carpenter and I wasn't going to be an electrician. And all those things are great. It's a cliche to say there's nothing wrong with that. But I couldn't be that person, and I suppose I like a lot of people growing up in that time, there's a lot of drinking. It's with everybody. And I didn't actually start drinking till I was in my 20s because of how I'd grown up. And I think that was a really good thing too, because you are a little bit more sensible, I'd like to think. And it just helped with a lot of my decisions. And then when I was waffling a little, but I just started thinking, as I became more of writing and more of my own songs, I needed to find out who I was, from all those memories.
Well, and by not drinking till your 20s, you would have kept a few more brain cells than your peers, quite possibly.
Very possibly. I stress possibly because then I went into touring bands, so right. I may have
lost you. But I suppose it also gave you the opportunity to be the observer while your peers were running around being drunken young men, fulfilling some of those stereotypes you're talking about. Really, I mean, they may well have been doing that because they thought that's what blokes did too. You got to observe that rather than being in the middle.
Yeah. Look, and I was probably. Maybe I wasn't quite the Stranger Things group of kids, but I was definitely part of the nerds. And I actually went, one of the things I do remember is my first day at school, I met one of my best friends all the way through school, a guy called Jim Minson, or James Minson, goes by these days. And he was John Minson's youngest son, who started and did the Hoedown radio show in Tamworth on 2DM for forever, and of course Laurie's younger brother, and he was a beautiful and is a beautiful soul who but we were definitely on the fringes of the cool kids at school, and he was a musician. He was a wonderful violinist who became a glassblower, so there was that arts thing all around. So I was never that sort of guy. I probably, when you do get into touring groups, you tend to try and become those people so you can fit in. It's exactly what you're saying, and that's a lesson. I very much became a person I didn't want to be doing that, and I remember when Keith Urban came into the band I was in at the time called Rust Indians Rockettes, and it was a party band, and we were one of the biggest bands in Queensland doing shows, and it was the start of a long journey actually, because we knocked heads quite a bit, because he was this young talented guy who was really focused, so on being a musician, obviously on his career, and he was all about learning how to be better at being on stage and how to be a better songwriter. And that was actually a real turning point for me. At first, you wouldn't have known it, because I was very unsure of myself, and we clacked heads. I had a bit of a temper. I had a lot of a temper, which I've worked on a lot since the years. I think that's probably something to do with my losing my dad young too. I am sort of trying to thought here, because you're making me think a little bit, and this is what anyway, sorry, no
need to apologize, it's all interesting.
Yeah, look, so it's one of those things that, so we were then in a band together called Three Magic Words after that. And it was actually Keith Urban, Peter Clark, and Marlon Holden. And then when Keith started going out, traveling to Nashville, the guys asked me to come in, so which was wonderful. And that was around that time, it was all starting to turn around. And I was learning more about songwriting, because Keith was literally coming back from Nashville, from being, say, in the MCA studio, from recording songs.
Yeah. And
this, obviously, Peter and Marlon and I became the core of Saltbush 6 4 or 5 years ago. And that was just the most wonderful circle. So we had Brad Hula Hooper, who'd also done some shows and tours with Keith. And so where am I getting to now? I'm getting to about 1990. This is all coming back to the father's eyes. So Keith went in Starmaker, and I remember we were playing a gig up in Brisbane somewhere, the three of us, one of the pubs late one night, and obviously a Saturday night. Oh no, it would have been a Sunday night back then. And he won Starmaker. And we got the call straight away, can you jump in the car and come down and back him for all the promo shows?
Oh gosh.
So that's a really, really important date, because from that point in, we came down, we did all the stuff we'd known, we already knew some of the originals. And I think I Never Work on a Sunday became the first single. And wow, that was the real start of my songwriting, becoming a better songwriter journey. So I've been writing lots of songs, and lots of bad songs, a couple of good songs. And I loved it that Keith had learnt that Nashville thing of really being able to hone in on I want to say hit, but a good song, a great song, a really, that speaks to your heart, and has a great sing-along lyric. And that really started me thinking about all those little memories that came together in the songs.
And how interesting that is, that there's like that vicarious education for you, really. Keith went off and learned some things in Nashville, and you were cluey enough to pick it up from whatever he was doing. And maybe just from what you were saying about the fact the two of you clashed a little bit, maybe that was, I don't know, that maybe a slight competitiveness with wanting to write as well as he did.
Absolutely, yeah. No, and one of the things you do is, again, this is what made me go down this deep, long path, is that that stuff you don't think about at the time. At the time, you're just angry. You just react to things. I remember being in the studio, we were recording some songs to mime at a TV show, Miss Surf Girl or something. It used to be a big TV fundraiser show up here and in Queensland. And I remember Keith distinctly. This is one of my first clashy memories, and it sticks in my head because later on I was wrong and I was an idiot. So he said to me, "That's the wrong harmony," and I went, "No, it's not." That's you're getting your back up straight away,
Yeah.
And just really stupidly, because I used to be that sort of person who would think afterwards and hopefully the right thing, and I like to think that I come around pretty quickly, but I learned to be a better person and stop and think and go, okay, that's true. And you don't become a better at anything until you start, I think, until you really do just start being a nicer, thoughtful person all around. Then I got to be a better player. I realised that I wasn't as good a player as him. I realised, more importantly, I realised the focus that he had. That when so I went in the Star Maker myself
Right.
in 1990 somewhere, but and you know, got to the big finals and the whole lot, but obviously didn't win it. And by then, it just was still just a great experience, and happy I did it. So that was that different person, you know. And from there, I started to write Father's Eyes. I wrote my first tape album.
Right. Yeah.
And, I did some co-writing with Tanya Kernigan back then, because I was working with Lee, did a tour with Lee, and I played with Tanya for a few years, and just wonderful experience. Yeah. And that was a great experience too. So all those little things, I learned how to write a lyric that you could sing, hopefully.
Yeah, right. And Tanya is a wonderful person from what I can tell. So I imagine it was lovely working with her. But it's interesting what you were saying about having a temper and wondering whether that was related to losing your father at such a young age. I think grief at any age makes people short-tempered. And of course, when you're a kid, you don't know what's going on, and there's probably no one to identify it as that. And those stereotypes we were mentioning about how young Australian men behave don't really offer you any opportunity to talk about grief either. So you were kind of wedged into that, I would imagine.
Yeah. So that finally brings me back to the song, probably, that there's the last line in it is maybe a little more confronting, because I do talk about that, maybe obtusely, that he made mistakes and I made mistakes, you know. So you know, I don't talk about it much, but he was a heavy drinker. But when my mother passed away, we found some newspaper articles, and I had a brother who had passed away between my older sister and myself. Right. And there was he'd been a story in the paper where he had been picked up by the police for drink driving, and it was the day my younger brother had passed away. You know, so that's all those things that you can just judge somebody for your whole life. Mm-hmm. You realize they're just people, and there's a reason for it. That you know, that maybe my mistakes haven't been the same. But the yelling at people when I shouldn't have, or just reacting, plenty of things I know I've need to atone for. But we're all just people, and we're all trying to be better, and we're all trying to get on. And when you realise that, you can be a bit nicer to yourself. You know, you spend a lot of time just going, oh, I'm a horrible person. How could I have done that? And you really need to stop doing that and just be a bit nicer. Be apologetic and be nice to people, but we're all human.
Yeah. And it's also therefore about getting out of your own way as an artist, I think, because if you put those sorts of emotions in your way, all that self-hatred, it does become a block, or it can, well, not necessarily it does, but I think it really can. And so in order to create more freely, it's better to free that up.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I used to run on emotion, thinking I had to be excited and driven all the time. So that sort of helps to pull back from to write, to be a bit more introspective. Mm-hmm. So I have another song I was going to put out this year that's a real up-tempo song. And because I put out the song Big Noise, Bright Lights earlier in the year that Marlon and I wrote together, and I had this huge plan of doing a run of really up-tempo, dancey, sing-along songs. Saltbush Six did a tour run with the Roadhammers, the Canadian band, Jason McCoy and the boys, and they were a profound effect on us. Just beautiful people, wild and funny, and a great show, you know, really exciting. And we're a fairly similar band. And that's where Marlon and I started writing that Big Noise, Bright Lights. You know, we wanted some live songs. And but of course we lost Marlon last year from cancer. And then Brad Hula Hooper, who was our other guitarist, unfortunately passed away from cancer this year as well. And so we were hurting. So that's actually why I decided I wanted to put out Father's Eyes, right? Because I wanted to talk to people and talk to myself about that sort of hurt, you know, that I sometimes you just want to sit back and listen to something nice, and I'm trying to think of a better word, but a bit more middle of the road and more emotional, and then get ready for a party.
Yeah, but also something you can hear the lyrics to. And I think, Australian artists like you who have grown up in and around country music are really articulate in the way they sing. And it is a real compliment to the listener as well, because every single word on your song is clear. So therefore the story is clear, and therefore your father comes through as a character. So that is something nice to listen to.
Yeah, thank you. I hope so. Obviously the memories, we're driving the truck, being there when he was a shearer. They are those little snippets of memory. And that's, look, growing up in Tamworth, that was the thing I did get from country music very early on, was obviously it's all about the story. And and it still is to a certain extent. I mean, there's a lot of pop sort of stuff that's exactly where I was talking about, just more about just having a good time and dancing. That's great too. But I think the best and the truest heart of country is telling your story, and telling other people's story too, of course. To do some of that too.
Yeah. So you talked about thinking of another song to release this year. Are you looking ahead to writing or perhaps releasing some songs you've already written in the next few months?
Yes. So I've actually got that up-tempo song into some people to see about getting a mix done. I do want it. I'm looking at here and then overseas too, because I want it to be the best it can be. And it's probably silly, but I'm not saying the title yet because I'm hoping it's really clever. So I'll probably be bullying myself into that. But look, it's one thing to talk about the heart of music and the writing and all that, but you still have to be so aware of the music business. So because before this year, I'd only released a couple of 3 albums, but CDs and tapes, long before. I'd actually taken a long break from it because of Soulforce 6, because obviously we didn't want to be clashing with releasing our first album. And also because it costs a lot of money to put out an album, and it used to cost a lot more, but it still costs a lot of money, so you need a little bit of I needed a break from that. The problem with that is if you haven't streamed a song before, you don't actually exist. So when I put up Big Noise, Bright Lights, I had been told this, but I had to find out myself, that I didn't have what they call an artist profile on Spotify or Apple Music. You have to have put out the song to get that. So if some of the audience are aware, a pre-saves and things like that, so of a single or of a preferred track, couldn't do any of that. Right. So in a way, I just had to throw the song out. Yeah. Which was okay, because it was, it was also a bit of a tribute to Marlon, because we'd written it together. But yeah, so Father's Eyes was a bit more exciting because I could actually, suddenly a couple of weeks beforehand, the list came up from Spotify saying, would you like to submit your songs for playlists? And yes, please. Yeah. So that's leading me to the fact that I actually need to have a third song out before I can get a proper YouTube channel. I mean, I have my own YouTube channel, but to have an official YouTube channel, you have to have 3 songs out. Right. You also have there's another reason for that, which is so I hope to put an album out next year, which will be mainly new songs, but a few new versions of some of my older songs. Yeah. But I've had to plan putting out a few more songs as singles so that has more weight when I get it finished. Fantastic. Well, Allan, I have a lot more to ask you, but I am going to leave it there today because I'll keep some in reserve for when your album's out, and hopefully I can talk to you then. But it was really lovely to talk to you about Father's Eyes. I hope everyone goes and listens to that lovely single, and look forward to the next one. Thank you so much, Sophie. I hope that speaks to them. Thank you.